Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming to the program author J.N. Prioleau, and she is the author of Old Rabbit. She's been writing stories for many years. When her son was a toddler, it really inspired her to write stories about the funny events in his life. She discovered the more she wrote stories about him, the more he wanted to read. So she continued and then published a few. Javon, how are you?
Good. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Great. Well, let's start with a big question. Tell us about your book, please.
Well, the book Old Rabbit. Old Rabbit is based on a funny story that my uncle used to tell us when we were little. And so I promised when I grew up that that I would actually write that story into a book, but I sort of changed a few things around. I didn't write it exactly as he told it. I just added a few funny things and just made it more appealing for kids.
Now, who did you write your book for specifically?
For specifically, the target audience for Old Rabbit is for ages 2, 3, 4, and up. For little kids who like to read funny stories, like interesting bedtime stories, and like just to hear stories from their parents. You know, just gather around their parents and sit around and listen to them act out the characters in the book.
Now, could you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that runs throughout the book?
Well, for Old Rabbit, the underlying theme that runs throughout the book, it focuses on sharing, how important it is to share. So it starts off with him not wanting to share anything, and then it ends with him sharing with all of his friends and family.
If you could compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
Well, for Old Rabbit, I believe the series of books I would compare it to is maybe the Cat in the Hat books. It's one of those funny books in which the rabbit gets into mischief and he does funny things to cover it up. So I would compare it to the Cat in the Hat. For the Clyde series, I would compare that book to those series of books to Dennis the Menace. With the character Clyde, which is based on my son's life, as a child, he was very active and always got into things, and he didn't mean to be a bad child, and most of the times he thought he was being helpful. But the fun part about was that when he was a kid and he did what kids do, he made a mess, and then he tries so hard to cover it up in hilarious ways. And so that series is based on Dennis the Menace.
What period of life do you find you write about most often?
I write about most often about my son when he was a toddler to early primary school age. I feel as though that age range is so short, it goes by so fast that it makes you want to capture every moment, freeze in time just for a little while. I miss when he was that age. Kids at that age see their parents as superheroes, and I was definitely a super mom, and my kid honestly believed I hung the moon and lit the stars.
What is the one thing you would give up to become a better writer?
Not sure if I would give up anything. I feel as though you should not give up anything to write better. Writing is about living. In order to write your best, you must have lived your fullest and understand/experience all human emotions.
Now, does your family support your career as a writer?
My family, they're wonderful. They do support my decision to write, but I believe they don't quite understand why I do it. I talk to them somewhat about my projects, but mostly keep it to myself.
Do you think someone could be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly?
That's a good question. In order to be a writer, one must understand emotions. You don't necessarily have to feel emotions or experience it as long as you understood it and have witnessed someone going through it, that I believe you can write about it.
Have you ever experienced writer's block?
Writer's block. I don't really believe in it. So I would say no. I've never had writer's block. At one point, I believe I had some form of writer's block, but it turned out I was just tired and needed some rest. I've always had a story in my head and can write out an original story on a daily basis.
If you had to do something differently as a child or a teenager to become a better writer as an adult, what would you have done?
To become a better writer, I think I would have read a variety of genres to become more aware of the different writing styles.
What was your favorite childhood book?
Oh, this is easy. As a child, I loved the Berenstain Bears book. Even though it was fictional, I sort of related myself to the sister bear. And I loved that they were a strong, loving family. I told myself when I grew up that I want my family to be just like that. However, life happened and I never got the family I wanted, but I still love the family I got.
Now, did your environment or upbringing play any major role in your writing?
My environment, well, I've always been a child who wanted to just get away from certain things. We were not very rich when I grew up, and writing was just a way of me to escape my current environment and just live in a different world, and that got me through it.
Can you tell us about your genre and why you prefer to write in that genre?
Children's books. I love writing children's books. I love the reason why I love writing children's books. I like when kids sit down and actually read, or they want you to read them a story. I think that helps build their imagination, and it helps them grow, and so that's why I love writing the children's book, just to appeal to the kids.
So, what's been your most rewarding experience since publishing this book?
Since publishing this book, my most rewarding experience is to getting it out in print. I published this book as a dedication to my uncle Charlie that passed. And before he passed, I wrote the book, I wrote the story, and then I read him the entire story, and he told me, "You have to make sure you have to get this in print." And I promised him that, and then once I got into print, I felt relieved, and I felt as though I was honoring him, and that was my most rewarding experience.
If someone were to write a book about your life, what would the title be?
My life. Oh gosh, my life. The I don't know the ups and downs of Javon. Gosh, I'm not quite sure exactly what the title would be. I mean, I dabble into a lot of things.
How would you describe your writing style?
I use a lot of first voice in the Clyde series, and so in an old Rabbit series, it was third person, but I don't really have a particular writing. So I guess it all depends on the type of book that I'm trying to put out there. The Clyde series was in first person, and because he was telling a story from his perspective, and Old Rabbit was written in a third person voice. So I guess it all depends on the type of book it is.
So, based on your experience as a writer, what's the one recommendation you would make to authors just starting out?
The one recommendation for authors writing children's books, I would tell them to make sure they find a really good illustrator, an illustrator that can capture exactly what they're trying to say.
In your opinion, who should buy your book?
I believe that who should buy my book are parents with kids who's about 1, 2, 3 years old and up, especially those ones who's trying to read. These books are it's a very easy read, and the kids will get a kick out of it because it's funny, and it teaches them a lesson at the end. So it's geared towards boys and girls between the ages of 2 and 6.
Do you have a website?
I do. My website is www.jnprillo.com.
Could you spell your name for us, please?
That's JN, and then the last name is Prioleau.
Well, this has been just great. Our guest today has been J.N. Prioleau, and she is the author of Old Rabbit. Javon, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Listen to some of your favorite authors every day, 24/7 by visiting theauthorshow.com. Just click on the book title and the player at the top of the page. These interviews are available to book buyers worldwide.